So we've talked about writing linear equations based on a graph. We've also talked about writing linear equations when we've been given a point and a slope, and then this last video on writing linear equations will be about writing equations when given 2 points. So there are three formulas that we need to know. The first formula is the slope formula, which we've already learned, but that is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then we also need to know the point slope form, which we learned in the last video, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And then the last equation that we need is the slope-intercept form, which is what all of our equations are going to end up looking like. So we just want to make sure that after we're done simplifying and getting all of our numbers set up, that it looks like that y equals mx plus b formula. So let's start going through an example. The first example is we want to be able to write an equation that goes through the points 2, 3 and 1, 2. So when we're given 2 points, the first thing that we need to do is find the slope between those 2 points. And the way we're going to do that is using the slope formula. So what I'm going to do is label these x1, y1, x2, y2. I label the first one x1, y1, and the second one x2, y2, mostly because it's the first point and the second point. If you really wanted to switch it around and have x2, y2 first, and then x1, y1 second, you can do that. It doesn't matter, but just make sure that you have the x1 and y1 together, and you have the x2 and y2 together. Like, we couldn't have x1 and y2 together. So from here, we're going to put them inside the slope formula. So it's m equals, we start with y2 on the top, and our y2 in this case is 2, minus my y1, which is 3, over x2, which is 1, minus x1, which is 2. Now we're going to simplify that. So 2 minus 3 on top gives me -1. And then 1 minus 2 on the bottom gives me -1 as well. -1 divided by -1 can be simplified to just be 1. So my slope is 1. Great. Now that we know the slope is 1, we're going to move to the point slope form, which is that y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 equation. And we're going to replace the y1, the m, and the x1 in there with what we know are y1, m, and x1. So I would have y minus my y1, and y1 in this case is 3 still. That doesn't change. We still have a x1 and a y1. And then equals my m, and the m that we just found was 1. And then times x minus your x1, which is 2. So now we just want to simplify this really similarly to how we did it with the last video by distributing the slope inside the parentheses. We would get y minus 3 equals 1 times x is 1x, 1 times -2 gives me -2. And then we want to solve that for y, so we would need to move the 3. To move the 3 would add 3 to both sides, but we're going to only add it to the thing without the x because we only add like terms. The 3's cancel out on this side, we're just left with y, 1x, and then -2 plus 3 gives me a 1. So my final answer is y is equal to 1x plus 1. That is in slope-intercept form. It's that y equals mx plus b form. It looks really pretty, easy to graph, and there we have it. Okay, let's go through another example. In this example, we want to be able to write an equation through the points 4, -1, and 1, 5. So once again, we're going to start by labeling them x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to use my slope formula to find the slope first. So the slope formula is y2 starts, so y2 in this case is 5, minus y1, which is -1. I'm going to put that -1 in parentheses because I don't want it to get confused with the negative on the outside. Then on the bottom we have x2, which is 1, minus x1, which is 4. Now I'm going to simplify that. Y minus -1, the two negatives right next to each other make a big positive. I can just make that a big plus. So now it's really 5 plus 1, which is 6. And then on the bottom I have a 1 minus 4, which gives me -3. 6 divided by -3 can be simplified to just be -2. So that's my m. Now I'm going to use the point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to replace the y1, the m, and the x1. So y1 was -1, so I'd say y minus -1 equals m, and m is the thing I just found, which is -2. and then x minus my x1, which is 4. Now, the two negatives on the left side that are right next to each other cancel each other out, so I'm just left with y plus 1 on that side. Then I'm going to distribute the -2 on the right side. So -2 times x gives me -2x. Then -2 times -4 gives me a positive 8. The very last step is to get that y by itself, so it's in that slope-intercept form. To get the y by itself, we would subtract 1 from each side. Once again, we're subtracting from the thing without the x because we want to combine like terms. The 1's cancel out on the left side, we're just left with y. And then I've got -2x, and then 8 minus 1 gives me 7, so plus 7. And this is my slope-intercept form. Y equals -2x plus 7. Okay, number 3. So the third example wants you to go through 7, 3, and -1, 3. So first step, label it x1, y1, x2, y2. Now we want to find the slope between those two things. So we start with y2, which is 3, minus y1, which is also 3. Then x2 on the bottom, which is -1, minus x1, which is 7. We're going to simplify that. So on the top we have 3 minus 3, which is 0. And on the bottom we have -1 minus 7, which would give me -8. Now, 0 divided by anything is just 0, so my slope is 0. This is kind of a special case. Because I got 0, I can still use that point slope form, but because I got 0, what's going to happen is I'm going to end up with just y equals some number. I'm going to show you with the point slope form, but just be aware, if your slope is 0, you're going to end up with y equals just a number without an x or anything like that. So we're going to use the point slope form though, which is that y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And we're going to replace everything we know. So y minus my y1, which is 3, equals my m. Okay, we decided that was 0. Times x minus my x1, which is 7. Okay, now we're going to distribute the 0. So 0 times anything is 0, right? Which means that I'm going to have this y minus 3 is equal to 0 plus 0, which is just 0. So really I can just write 0 right there. Then I have y minus 3 equals 0. I want to get y by itself, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And I end up with y is equal to 3. And I know this isn't in slope-intercept form because slope-intercept form has that mx, but this is as simple as it's going to get. This is the way we're going to leave it. If for some reason you get a slope that looks kind of like this, but the 0's on the bottom, so for example, if I had -8 over 0, this would be considered an undefined slope. And with an undefined slope, instead of having y equals some number, you have x equals some number. And so those are your two special cases. Let's go through the last example. The last example wants you to go through -3, -5, and 1, 2. Once again, label them x1, y1, x2, y2. Start with your slope formula. So I'm going to start with y2, which is 2, minus y1, which is -5. Put it in parentheses. Then I'm do x1, which is 1, minus x2, x2, which is 1, minus x1, which is -3. Excuse me. Then I'm going to simplify. So the two negatives on top cancel each other out, make a big positive. Same thing happens on the bottom. They just make a big positive. So on the top I have 2 plus 5, which gives me 7, and on the bottom I have 1 plus 3, which gives me 4. 7 over 4 cannot be simplified, so 7 over 4 is your slope. Now you're going to use the point slope formula, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Replace the y1 with the -5, so y minus -5 equals your m, which we just decided was 7/4, and then x minus your x1, which is -3. Okay, so now we're going to simplify. The two negatives right next to each other on the left side give me a plus, so I'm going to say y plus 5. And then I'm also going to kind of do that on the right side as well. I'm going to make it x plus 3 because the negatives cancel each other out. Now that we have all the negatives figured out, we can distribute the 7/4, and we're left with y plus 5, because the left side didn't change, equals 7 over 4x plus 7/4 times 3 is 21 over 4. Okay, and then the very last step is to get the y by itself. So to get the y by itself, we need to move the 5. right now the 5 is adding, so to get rid of it, we subtract 5 from each side. And we're left with y, because the 5's cancel out, equals 7 over 4 x, and then 21/4 minus 5 is 1/4, so plus 1/4. And this is my answer. This is in slope-intercept form. I know it has fractions, which make it look a little bit weird, but it still is in slope-intercept form, which is the way that we want it. And this is how you graph or write linear equations with 2 points.